Hello everyone, my name is Fulin Wang and I'm going to talk about slavery today. So slavery was a huge trend back in the 20th century. Millions of slavery transactions occurred during that period of time. Slaves are used as a tool or animal that helps their owners to do some hard work. Southern United States and West Europe intensively depend on slavery. West Europe, back in the days, they were pretty advanced, so pretty much they can bully everyone they want. Southern United States, um, their economy depend on farming a lot, so a lot of farmers use slaves to help them feed the animals or doing some farmer work. I'm also going to talk about what are the detailed transactions and exact numbers about slaveries in southern United States and Western Europe in the couple next slides. Abstraction. Abstraction is using computer language, such as providing data to represent real-life entities. Useless contents will be eliminated by this process, and significant factors of this entity will be prominent. Age is a float that describes how long a slave has lived on Earth. This might be a factor by concerns while buying new slaves. Number of transactions is an integer describing how many slaves have been sold each time. We use this to determine what kind of slaves buyers like the most. Name is a string that represents the name of name of the area. We use this to filter the report. Average magnitude is a float that describes how many slaves on average a person bought. This is a key factor of determining which country had worse slavery. Transaction rate is a float that describes what the percentage a transaction may be occur. This indicates how likely a transaction can occur under different situations. Price is a float that describes how much a person has to pay for a slave. This helps us know the value of the slave back in the days. Here's the data map. So we have four major types of dictionaries: buyer, seller, slave, and transaction. For buyer, there are four properties: country of origin, state of origin, full name, origin. Those four properties are all strings. For seller, there are also four properties, four strings: country of origin, state of origin, full name, and origin. For slave, there are four properties as well: skin color, which is a string; age, which is a float; name; gender, they're both strings. For transaction, there are five parts. Date is a string. Number of total slaves purchased is integer. Number of adult slaves is integer as well. Number of child slaves is also an integer. Sale details, however, is another dictionary, which includes prices listed, an integer; discount rate, also known as transaction rate, is a float; price is a float; predicted interest rate is a float; payment method, which is a string. Now we jump to the next page. This page, I'm going to talk about the properties I selected and how they are uh, listed under the dictionaries. So age, the float, it is under the dictionary associated with slave. Number of transaction is an integer under the dictionary associated with transaction. Name is a string under the dictionary associated with slave. Average magnitude is a float under the dictionary of sale details. Price is a float under the dictionary of sale details. Transaction rate is a float under the dictionary of sale details as well. As for limitation, this data set only has data from 1856 to 1861. However, according to the history, slavery ended at around 1965. I mean 1865. We have no idea how many more slave sales occurred in the last couple of years. Also, the majority of the data is the slave sales in New Orleans. Of course, slaves also occurred in other countries like England and France. We do have data in those kind of countries, but the database is not as strong as it is for New Orleans. First question: what ages of slaves are most desirable for buyers to purchase? The reason why I want to talk about this question is that I want to show people what types of slaves are most popular and how many young people or teenagers have experienced this inhuman uh, treatments back in the days. Okay, so like we see in the visualizer on the upper right, we can tell that buyers like to purchase slaves within the age of 20 and 45. Why? Because during this period of time, um, people have most of their strength. They can do a lot of hard work. They can lift heavy stuffs as well. So they're pretty popular. Question two. On average, is slavery worse in France or England? France and England both invaded Africa and also uh, transported some citizens to North America. They were both pretty advanced back in the days, but I want to know which one is better. And like we see in the graph, the average magnitude of slaves a person buys is 2.6 in France, but the average magnitude is almost 3 in England. This tells us that there were more slave transactions occurred in England compared to France. Question 3. What is the tendency of slavery price with the change of transaction rate in England? This question, I want to show people how much rich people would like to spend on a slave, and also how much value a slave actually represent back in the days. Uh, how humiliating this inhuman things was. So the visualizer shows a decreasing linear relationship between two variables. This shows that no one would buy a slave if the price was too high. Lower price would increase the transaction rate, and therefore I conclude that the tendency of slavery price as the increase of transaction rate is negative. Here are some social impacts. There are three types of stakeholders: historians, governments, and police. Historians would be interested in which countries were arbitrary and inhuman back in the days. They would also be interested in knowing that what types of slaves were most popular. They can use the result to prove some facts written in the textbook. They just want to provide as much evidence as they can. The governments, on a different level, um, they will want to know how bad or unfair their citizens lived back in the days so that they could do better to ensure those unfairness would not happen these days. Police could also use the source to prevent nowadays slave transactions, and it is true that slavery still exists in the dark side these days. The police would know what ages are most likely to be targeted by lawbreakers, so they could put more attention on them. However, there are some potential conflicts between stakeholders. The government demands the police to prevent as much slavery transactions as possible, but the police might not be able to do such in a short amount of time, since they need to collect tremendous amount of information and understand the situation of black market trading. You can't just walk to a homeless person and tell them to be aware of a certain a, a certain amount of people. Governments may not want historians to expose the bad history as well. It only shows how bad and incapable the government wants to keep the society. It does not make the government look any better. And this is it. Thanks for watching. I have neither given or received unauthorized assistance on this assignment. Thank you.